Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org community podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. Today's podcast is going to be focused on sharing some experiences, the experiences of an organization, a health insurance provider, and their journey to agility and to the product mindset and to the product operating model. It's an interesting journey, and I'm very fortunate, lucky. I feel blessed to have Mary Iqbal, PST, founder of Rebel Scrum and organizer of our annual Scrum event in Madison, Wisconsin. I was fortunate enough to go to Madison, Wisconsin last year to sample this experience. It was incredible. And I've only got positive things to say about both the place and the event. But this is when Mary and I started talking a little bit about some of her experience. And I thought everybody would like to hear this. So welcome to the podcast, Mary.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and yeah, it was great seeing you in Madison. That was a lot of fun, and I think people don't realize what a beautiful place Madison really is. And we've got cheese. You know what's better than that, right? Trees and cheese.
Cheese and trees, and obviously the old fashions, brandy old fashions, which has become a staple of my drinking list now. Yes, it is an amazing place, and what really shocked me, Mary, was just the sheer energy and passion that the audience and the community, the agile community, has. And it was my first time to Madison, and that really blew me away. It was a fantastic introduction to Madison and to that community.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it. It was a lot of fun for me, and people gave such positive feedback about the event, and I think people really enjoyed it. So it was fun experience for me, just all the way around.
And of course, it's going to happen again this year. So if you're in the area, or even if you're not in the area and you fancy a trip to sample some cheese and some trees in Madison, Wisconsin, go check it out. It's on our website and you can find it. But anyway, that's not what we're here for, though it's always good to plug a fabulous event. Let's first start a bit about you.
So it's a fantastic company. I was there for 8 years. I actually started off in project management. And so I moved on up to program management and finally was their agile transformation manager. But the story I want to talk about today is really for one of their government contracts, because that's what they do. So when I say they process health claims for the military, I mean they have a contract to process health claims for the military. And so this particular contract was launched with Waterfall initially. It was the last contract they ever did with Waterfall. But as soon as they went live, they went agile with it, with the maintenance and delivery. So that's the story I want to talk a little bit about today.
I'm really interested in that, and yes, it seems like a fantastic organization. So, all right, so we've got this existing system. You've got this contract with, dare I say, the government, which is, I mean, I love America. I chose to be here, but working with the government is always interesting and challenging. We know that. So, tell me a little bit about how you introduced agility and the journey.
Of course. So this contract went live in 2018, and when they first went live, it was the largest contract I've ever had. So I spoke with some senior management and some senior leaders, and we decided to try Agile. And the customer was on board, the leadership was on board, the team was certainly on board. So we initially tried Agile. It was they had used Agile in small pockets before, but it was the first time they'd used it on such a large scale. So initially, management had a lot of guardrails. So when they first went agile with this contract support, they actually had 5 different products. I'm going to call it. So they had 5 different teams actually siloed in this way, which was an improvement actually on what they had before, which was previously they really, well, this was a new contract. So they actually didn't have anything, but they wouldn't have done it this way. So when they first went agile, it was good. Right? They did get some benefits from agility. They got a lot more transparency they had ever had on previous contracts, but they got there with agile. And so that took about a year, right? And they were going agile, but still it wasn't as powerful of an experience as they had hoped. Yes, they had more transparency. Yes, they had more engagement. Yes, the customer was more engaged, but it felt like they could be doing more. So this is the point where I kind of re-engaged with them, and I talked to senior leaders, and we did a little bit of analysis, and it turns out that 30% or more of their work on any individual Scrum team had dependencies on another Scrum team, right? So you can imagine this, right? And that was what led them to say, we can't continue this. So they brought me back in and to do a little bit of analysis on what we could do to make this happen and make this better. So I met with some senior leaders and we talked about, well, what are your products actually, right? Your product is not authorizations. Your product is not just invoicing, right? Or claims to off match. What are your products? And so the executive team took a step back, and their managers and their leaders, and they had a conversation. Well, who is our customer, right? And what are our products? And they came back and they said, we actually have two products. And those two products are essentially customer service, right? And claims processing. Those are our two products. So they took a step back and they identified that. And then they put in place one product owner for claims processing and one product owner for customer service. And this is a huge change. So we went actually from a total of 6 product owners, if I'm not mistaken, right? Eventually down to two product owners, one for this system and one for that system. So it was a huge change. And if we follow the story just with claims processing, so we defined our product. We said there's one product. And all of these teams are going to come together to support that one product, which is fantastic. And then from there, right? I know I'm going to pause and say, question, what are your thoughts so far? Do you have any questions or comments on that?
I mean, so let me just bring our listeners along for a second. So let me see if I can get this right. So basically, you got this insurance system, a medical insurance system. Obviously, the components of an insurance system were created in sort of like these product teams, 5 of them, 6 of them, they were all working together. When that created a significant amount of dependencies between them. So if you made a change in one area, it had to change often in others and et cetera, which slows down, dependencies slow things down. There's no ifs or buts about that. Everybody knows that. But also the implication was when the business came along and said, hey, we want this, they themselves had to then negotiate with each of the product owners for these different groups to actually ensure that this imperative went across the appropriate places, which again made it incredibly complicated and incredibly challenging to implement the experience. So ultimately, you went in, did a bit of analysis, and realized that actually the customer, the ultimate customer and the value that you're delivering could be grouped into 2 areas, which we are calling products, obviously. One is really about that whole customer experience, the person that's taking the insurance or is benefiting from the insurance, is going to the doctors, is getting their aspirin or whatever. And then it's the actual people that provide the medical organizations claiming for that. And so that's the 2 products that you provide. And then that meant you change the number of product owners, number of backlogs, and all of that infrastructure that supported them. Is that a fair summary, Mary?
It absolutely is a fair summary. And this was a huge change for us, right? We had gone from waterfall to agile with siloed teams. And then we're taking a step back and we're saying that these siloed teams are not working for us. It doesn't really make sense if you think about it, right? When we used to, if you want to make the analogy, and I don't know if you want to make this analogy, but I'm going to make it. When we used to run work with projects, we would bring together cross-functional teams. So when we went agile, they went to silos and it just did not work.
Well, feature teams, right? Because in some ways they were autonomous. They had complete control over their destiny. The problem is their destiny was determined by a set of features and capabilities in the internal system, not the actual value stream that the end customer was receiving. Thus, when you made changes to that experience, it then had an impact across all these different places. So you can see the logic to building feature teams. It is probably more efficient. You get to group all the skills, you get to focus on the same systems, you get to become really good at delivering to that set of feature areas. However, when your variability is driven from a customer, an end user, a consumer of the product capabilities, it gets a little bit of it's a bit of a problem.
Right. You're completely right. That is the exact trade-off we talked about. In fact, right. There is some benefits to having these feature teams, like exactly as you said, like people can specialize in part of the system. You really get to know how does the claims to auth match part of the system really work. And so there's some benefits to that. But on the other hand, when the customer only wants work on invoicing or only wants work on other parts of the system, you lose a lot of flexibility. And instead of worrying about what's the most valuable thing to do next, you're really worrying about, well, how do we keep all these teams busy when all they want is invoicing? And that's not the focus that we wanted.
Yeah, and
Right?
that makes total sense. And
Yeah.
this sort of like false economy of specialization of labor, specialization of labor works brilliantly if demand is linear and if it's not lumpy, and if you can effectively manage demand in that way, like in a production system, etc. The problem is in the situation in your situation is that demand isn't. It's all over the place in pursuit of things that are important to the ultimate customer of these products that you're providing. Okay, so now you've blown up the organization. Some product owners have changed their authority. Hopefully, they're still in the organization doing something else. And you've now got 2 products. So what happened next, Mary?
So once we had these 2 products, we needed to, of course, reorganize the teams. So the very first thing we had to do was communicate about this change, right, to the teams so that they knew what was coming. So a lot of communications happened to explain what was happening, what was going to happen next. And what was going to happen next was we're going to let those teams self-organize. We're not going to come in there and tell you you're going to be on this team and you're going to be on that team. We're going to let you self-organize. So this was right in let's see, 2019, I think it was, but we decided we're going to self-organize. And so it took a lot of communications just to get people to prepare for a self-organization like that. It's scary. It's new, it's different. So we did a lot of communications about it, a lot of training about it in advance. And then we came to the day of self-organization. And this was done actually remotely. And it was a 4-hour meeting. And the way we started the meeting was we had our product owner come in and talk about, here's the products that we have, right? And we actually did 2 separate self-organization sessions. There was one self-organization for the claims processing and one self-organization for the customer service. But so we did the self-organization session. There was roughly 60 or 70 people that were taking part in this. And we started off with our product owner. And she talked about what is the product and what are the left and right limits of the product? What's our vision, our future state for this product? And then within that, what's our goal? What are we shooting for this product? And then within that, what are my highest priority features? Where are we going with this? What are the upcoming deadlines? A little bit about the customer. She just really did a nice job of orienting everyone about where are we going? Why are we doing this? And then we had the leadership come in and do a little speech, kind of a rah-rah. We believe in you. We're going to let you self-organize because we believe in you and you're skilled people, and we believe in your ability to do this. And then we had the Scrum Masters come in. And they presented, well, actually, so leadership left at this point, right? So leadership left the building, right? And well, maybe not the building, the room, at least.
Yeah, they're probably out playing golf anyway, but that's okay.
Right. So these Scrum Masters came up and they presented what are the guardrails within which you're going to be allowed to self-organize. And so those guardrails were presented to the team, and they were pretty lenient guardrails. So they said we need a mix of different skills on every team. We need to have senior people and people who are newer to the team working together. And then they did something really interesting. They said, oh, and by the way, any team has to be able to pull any work, right? Which is completely different. And this was a guardrail that leadership really put some thought into. And they said, no, we want ultimate flexibility, right? Flexibility is more important to us than specialization. We want depth on the bench, right? We want people to learn different parts of the system. So this was interesting. And they had a few other guardrails too, right? And then the teams were asked to go into small groups kind of randomly and come up with their proposal. How many teams do you want to have, right? And we went through several iterations of that. The teams broke out into different rooms, and then each room came back, a few minutes later with their proposal, and each group kind of got feedback from the others, and they went back again. So we went through several iterations of that. And that took a couple hours, actually. And then towards the end of the day, the Scrum team said, well, we're going to push back on some of those guardrails. We want to have a team that is focusing on change orders, government change orders, and we want a team that's focused on production support, and then other teams can pull any work. So they said no to one of the guardrails. At the very end of the day, they presented their proposed team structure to leadership. Leadership said, okay, we find your arguments compelling. And then the teams at the very end of the day each decided who's going to be on each team. And that took like 2 minutes. I was really kind of shocked how fast that part of the day actually went. But the team members just assigned them, essentially just put their names on sticky notes on what team they wanted to be on. And that was it. And we closed out the day. The next day, there was team agreement meetings for every team. There was activities around what's our definition of done as a product. And then we started sprinting, right? We went with it. And it was such a positive experience. I got to tell you, it was very, very motivating and just energizing to be part of something like that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are really interesting about it. There's lots of things, but the things that really stand out is the clarity of product, the definition of it, what it is, the product, the product owner that came in and really set those. This is where the journey we're on. The leadership providing that safety that, hey, your career is not going to be destroyed by this, everybody. You've got a job, and this is the way we're actually going to succeed as an organization and make more money and be more successful and therefore, promote people and the like, creating that environment. And the guardrails, obviously super important. Otherwise you can't self-organize if you haven't got those guardrails. You're just running around like crazy, like a bunch of kittens or whatever, or in my case, small children, in my house. But so we got those guardrails, and then the other thing that it really highlights, which is sort of like an underlying sort of theme, is people can be pretty amazing if you just allow them. I mean, most organizations, when they do an organizational change at this level, Mary, they would tell people what teams they're in, tell them how they're going to be organized. And then the change management process is the persuasion model, as it were. Whereas what you did, which isn't that often actually, I've seen it happen a few times, is you allowed the teams to form. You allowed the teams to literally self-organize, as an, not quite as extreme as an open space, but a model similar to that. And I think that's really, people are incredibly able if you just give them that environment for success, which you really did. So how did it go? I'm just now curious. You've got these teams, they've got shared definition of done, they've got some team working agreements there, and they're doing it. How did it go?
Well, first off, the morale improved drastically immediately. Right. I'm just immediately. I think I was surprised that they used a measuring system and I don't fully understand the math behind this, but the HR team assures me that it was significant, like 7 points or something. It was very significant 6 months later, in fact, but you could tell the difference right away. Morale went significantly higher. And then we also had several measures of agility that we were tracking. So the first measure is throughput. Right, which is not a great measure of success. I'm going to grant you that, but it was still an impressive change. They improved throughput by 300% within 3 months. So a huge, significant change in throughput. But more important than that, lead time dropped as well by 20%, which was also quite astonishing. And then more important than that, customer satisfaction went up drastically because not only were they getting more done, which, okay, but also they were working on what mattered to the customer. And that's what really mattered. Our net promoter score went up. Customer satisfaction just generally went up. And stakeholders also were a lot happier because they're not having to go to 5 different people. They had one product owner that they could go to request work from. So a lot of I'm going to call it, the administrative burden was taken off of our internal stakeholders. So all around, it was definitely a success. And then other metrics that around claims quality were significantly higher. Metrics around technical debt right? Technical debt was significant, was impacted as well. So it was a really positive experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, ownership. It's funny. Technical debt. One of the biggest challenges with technical debt is encouraging people to mitigate it, right? A bit like
Right.
debt in general. But the benefit of having a clear ownership is if the same teams, the same people, if you're just working on something, actually your propensity to fix technical debt is actually lower than if you know the people that are going to be working on the thing that you're not fixing. So you end up with this sort of culture, particularly if you have that mungibility of people, that where other people will be working on other people's things. You feel a responsibility to leave your room cleaner than you found it when you went in. It's a bit like when I was recently in Japan, and I was at a large organization. I was going to say their name, but I probably better not. And their CTO was in the room, and this is the guy who's got like 100,000 people in the organization. I mean, it's a big company, and this is the CTO. And when we finished the meeting, he said he just started cleaning up. I was like, what the heck? So I started helping because I didn't want to look like an idiot. So me and him are like picking up the plates. We had a little lunch and tidying it up and putting it on the tray. And that's the culture in Japan. And everybody does that. School children clean their own classrooms. It's just that's the culture. And I think that technical debt is a great example of where this product model and this cohesive teams that are that are mungible, as it were, that move around depending on the work, and everybody does everything. You end up with that sort of let's clean up the room when we leave mentality,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Which is
We,
awesome.
yeah. I definitely hear what you're saying. And I know that production support, had not gotten that kind of attention before. And so not only was there what you're talking about, which is, let's not make a mess, right? But there was also that focus on it. And I would say the other thing that was interesting that happened, a few months later, I'm not sure how they're still using that product model today, right? It's 2018. It's or 2019 when they first did that. 2024. So 5 years later, still doing the product model, but they have reorganized themselves several times. And those other reorganizations did not really have management input. So I found out about them like later, after they'd already been sprinting in the new model. Like a couple of weeks later, they just mentioned, oh, by the way, just so you know, we reorganized. Great. And they felt empowered to do that. And so when the company or when the team was faced with different types of work, so if they had a new government change order that came down, they reorganized themselves to deal with that. Or they might move people around here or there and not do a big reorganization, but they just shifted themselves when they needed to do so. And that I think was I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it sort of goes against the model of the industrial paradigm that because ultimately the idea is everybody's a resource, you've got to optimize, specialize, etc., etc. And instead we focuses on delivering value as a team to the end customer, which is such a compelling story about this product mindset and the operating model that support it. So the last thing, and I know we have to keep these short. Gosh, we could talk for hours about this, Mary. But we got to keep it short because we try to support the idea that this is like when you're doing ironing 3 shirts or 1 trip to the grocery, that sort of length for our podcast. So what's next? Where are they now? What's I mean, obviously you're not quite as involved as you once were.
Well, so I'll start with, that was a very successful experience for them. That was actually the second time they had allowed a team to self-organize, but it was the first time they really defined products. And so because that was so successful, they did adopt the product model in general. So they went division by division and defined products. So for example, for their HI division, they actually had a 2-day meeting with their executives, their leaders, their directors, and they asked the question, well, who are our customers? Right? And from that, what are the services? What are the pains and gains of the customers? And then what are the services that we provide? What are our pain relievers and gain enhancers? And then they sort of grouped, here's our services. And they grouped the services and they formed products that way. So they did it for HI. They did it for GHA. They went around the division and did this because it was so successful and it really made sense. Now, one thing I would say though is they adopted products where it made sense, but how big you draw that product box, right? Depends on the product. So it depends on dependencies. So not everyone is in a product team. We still have, or they still have teams that are service teams. They call them service teams. Teams like, the server team, right? They're not part of a claims processing product, right? They're a service team. Infrastructure teams remain, I'm going to call it single technology focused. It's not a single technology, but I'm going to call them kind of service teams. But it overall has been very successful for them to really start thinking about, let's organize around the customer and what the customer's needs are. And from there, they focused on building that product owner accountability, right? And that's where they're at today, building that product owner accountability and moving from agile transformation at this point and into agile delivery is really where they're at today.
That sounds ever so compelling, and it's great to hear that they've been successful in this, the power of products and how that works. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it, Mary, and I think our listeners will as well. It's you were very honest and open, which is always good, and this journey has obviously been incredibly positive experience for everybody involved. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun.
Great. Okay, everybody. Well, that we were lucky enough, fortunate, blessed to have Mary Iqbal from PST, founder of Rebel Scrum and organizer of our annual Scrum event in Madison, Wisconsin, join us to talk about her experience, the insurance, the healthcare insurance organization based in Madison and the Midwest, and their journey from a waterfall model to an agile adoption model, using product as that mechanism, that glue to bring everybody together, and the success that they had. I certainly was inspired by that journey. So thanks for listening today. Thank you for listening to the Scrum.org community podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, share with friends, and of course, come back and listen to another podcast. I'm very lucky, fortunate to have the opportunity to talk to a variety of guests. Obviously, today we heard from Mary. There's also other stories that you might like to hear. Maybe you want to hear about Gillette and what they're up to with agility, or maybe some of our PSTs talking about some very detailed Scrum skills or facilitation techniques. It's all here at the Scrum.org community podcast. And thank you for listening. Scrum on.